back to another episode of Ministry Minutes. It's Sam and Luis, and we wanted to share some facts with you about Pentecost because we just celebrated Pentecost this last Sunday. So, why don't we just get into it?
Yeah, sure, let's do it. So Pentecost marks the day that the Holy Spirit descended upon the apostles and occurs 50 days after the resurrection of Jesus and 10 days after the ascension of Jesus. So it's 40 days and then plus another 10 is 50. Just to work out the timeline. And in between that time is, so like I said, 10 days. And fun fact, that time frame, those 10 days, is actually where the novena comes from. Or the idea, a lot of people don't, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So Mary and the apostles, after the ascension of Jesus into the heavens, they prayed 9 days straight, and then on the 10th day is when the Holy Spirit descended upon the 11 apostles.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, very interesting. And it's also known as the birthday of the church, which I think a lot of people know, but it's also really interesting to be reminded,
Yeah. And I think it's really neat, like something that my church always does is we actually have a birthday cake. We usually do a little festival for Pentecost, and we will actually have a giant birthday cake at the end, which I always think is really fun.
Yeah, so super cool. And then it also launches the Pentecost also initializes the large scale spread of the gospel of the Lord. So in Acts chapter 2 verse 41, it says that Peter spoke to a crowd after receiving the Holy Spirit, and some 3,000 people were baptized. So it really marks the start of the spread of the word of the Lord.
To share the good news.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
Indeed.
Yeah. Awesome. And so another fun fact that we didn't know was that Jewish people also celebrate Pentecost, but not for the same reasons as we do as Christians. So the celebration by the Jews for Pentecost is to observe God giving the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai 50 days after the Exodus. So in Jewish tradition, Pentecost takes place 50 days after Passover, and Passover is during the same time as Easter. So same timeline, slightly different reasons. So yeah, I thought that was really neat. Another thing, which this one may be a little bit more well known, at the very least, if you've never paid attention, you'll definitely note now, is that usually Pentecost is represented by the color red. So if you guys noticed, your priests were probably wearing red this weekend. If you guys have like banners and things like that change color with the liturgical seasons, you would have noticed that this weekend they were red for Pentecost. And that's supposed to symbolize the fire of the Holy Spirit. So I always thought that was really interesting. I'm somebody who is very into the liturgical colors of the season, so I always thought that was really neat. And one of the last things that we do want to share with you is the term Pentecost is a Greek term, and it comes from the word 50th, which is why it's 50 days after Easter Sunday. The name was first used in the Old Testament period, and then it was inherited by the New Testament authors. And then it again, going back to Acts 2, the Holy Spirit is usually symbolized by wind and fire. So when we talk about the rush of a mighty wind, and there appeared to them tongues as of fire. So that brings back in the colors, and then of course the wind that we were talking about earlier as well. And then the last thing that we do want to share with you guys is a quote from Pope Benedict on the meaning of Pentecost. So this was back in 2012. And he said, "This solemnity makes us remember and relive the outpouring of the Holy Spirit on the apostles and the other disciples gathered in prayer with the Virgin Mary in the upper room. Jesus, risen and ascended into heaven, sent his Spirit to the church so that every Christian might participate in his own divine life and become his valid witness in the world." So that means us. He's talking to us. "The Holy Spirit, breaking into history, defeats aridity, open hearts to hope, stimulates and fosters in us an interior maturity in our relationship with God and with our neighbors." So if I can be so bold as to kind of say, I think the general message from Pope Benedict here is that with each of us being blessed with the gift of the Holy Spirit, we are called into that accompaniment and that companionship with our neighbors, but also in our own relationships with Christ, we are called to continue to explore that and to further deepen that. And like I said, it is a blessing. It's a gift. So we do hope that you enjoyed this very quick, short fun facts about Pentecost. You'll have to forgive us for being a little late with our ministry minutes, but we hope that you learned something new from this week, just like we did. And we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to There's a Saint for That. And for this week, we will be talking about Saint Dymphna. Her feast day is on May 15th, which actually just passed not too long ago. And she's the patron saint of those suffering from nervous and mental afflictions. So very interesting. I think a lot of people will be like, what? I need to pray.
Yeah, especially because May is Mental Health Month.
Yeah.
So we thought this would be a pretty fitting way to end May.
Yeah, so if, for those of us that need that little help, we can always ask her to intercede for us in our prayers.
Definitely.
So that's awesome. So she was born to a pagan father and devout Christian mother. And when she was 14, she actually consecrated herself to Christ and took a vow of chastity at 14.
Which is so young.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing that really trips me out is so many of these saints threw themselves into a devotion at such a young age. And usually, tragedy comes right before or after, which is what happened in the case of Saint Dymphna. So after she took the vow of chastity, her mom ended up passing away, and of course her and her father were both heartbroken. But her father took a really heavy blow. It says that he was mentally unstable, and in a couple of the articles that we read, and searching up about her life, they used the term unhinged. So he had a really hard time with the passing of his wife. And so the king's counselors suggested that maybe he remarry, just because he was having such a rough time and he just wasn't making the best choices. And it wasn't something that ever crossed his mind, because he just felt like, how am I going to find somebody as beautiful as my wife? And some of his advisors then made the suggestion, well, why don't you marry your daughter, because she looks just like your wife? And because of the state that he was in, he thought, yeah, this is going to be kind of, the next best thing. And of course, Dymphna was not ready for that. And so she actually fled to Geel in Belgium. I hope I'm saying that correctly. In order to avoid marrying her father. And so she actually ran away with a priest, 2 servants, and the king's fool. So if I remember correctly, it's similar to a jester. And there she really became a huge part of the community and for those around her, especially the sick and the poor. So she ended up building a hospital for them, which was so kind.
Wow.
But because she used her wealth to build that hospital, her dad was able to find her, and so he actually made his way to Belgium, and he was like, you're gonna come home with me to Ireland. They were from Ireland. And the priest tried to interfere, I guess, for lack of a better term, and he didn't appreciate that, and so he beheaded the priest. So he said, no, we're going back to Ireland. And she again said no thank you, and her father became so enraged that he actually beheaded her. And so the people in Geel, they were so attached to them that they took it upon themselves to gather all the remains from both her body and the priest's body in order to lay them to rest. And because of the impact that she had there, they also built a shrine to her in the church, and many miracles have been proven to have taken place there. And this was something, again, that they erected in her honor, and so many people had come to the hospital that she had built and to the church. Specifically people with, it says mental ills, but mental illnesses, that they had to expand. And so in this shrine that remains there, they have some of her remains in a silver reliquary as well.
Wow.
Yeah, just to kind of obviously commemorate her and her spirit, but also all the good that she did there, which I feel like she could have done so much more if her life hadn't been cut short, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, what a way to go, honestly, because that's the one person that you don't expect to kind of take their anger out on you in that way. You know, and it's unfortunate, and you have to think about, you know, when you're in that deep of a grief, it's hard to think clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's how we got Saint Dymphna and how she was attributed to these causes. And so this was one I actually really enjoyed learning about. She's one that I'm not super familiar with, so to hear her backstory was really interesting.
So then she would be considered a martyr, right?
I don't know, because a martyr is somebody who was murdered for their faith, and she was beheaded because
she said no.
She didn't want to marry her dad.
Yeah.
So while it was faith-based, you know, because she had already consecrated herself to Christ, and she was basically a missionary, I'm not sure if she would be considered a martyr. We could look it up. If we find out, we'll place it down below right here. But yeah, so fun facts for you. As always, we do encourage you guys, if there's anybody in particular that you guys want us to look into, or if you have a particular devotion to one and you're like, hey, I think you guys would really like learning about this person, please let us know, either down in the comments or, you know, like I said, send us a message on social media. But until then, we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah, bye guys.
Bye.